spanning across 16,000 blocks, 10 different biomes, and transforming every in-game structure. I'm upgrading literally everything in Minecraft to create the ultimate survival map. I started this project as a 1 million subscriber special, with the aim to create a mega build that is also a completely playable survival map. Now, usually the builds that I create aren't really survival friendly, and they're on a much more massive scale. The purpose of this project was to create a custom map containing a selection of different biomes and transform all of Minecraft's default structures and environments to create one epic and playable map. So today, we'll be planning the project, creating the map, placing all of the vanilla structures, and transforming our first biome. And if you want to get the world download once the build is complete, then make sure you get this video to 80,000 likes and I'll transform the rest of the island. To begin planning this massive project, I started to sketch out a general layout for the island and all of the biomes, choosing only the most appropriate ones for this map. Now, I did my best to position each of these biomes logically in relation to one another, so that way you won't be walking directly from the snowy tundra into the scorching desert. I thought the plains biome was a good hub for the center of the map, which we'll actually be transforming later on in this video. Now, as you can see, I added some little symbols next to each of the biome labels, as I plan to use themes in each biome, which I'll reveal a little bit more about once we've created the map in World Painter. Now, with our map planned out, I jumped into World Painter to gradually create our custom island and slowly make this world a reality. Now, I originally planned for this custom world to be a fair bit smaller, but I ended up miscalculating the proportions of the world and made the map 2 times bigger. I build a mountain range for the snowy biome, add in some rivers and a lake to break up the landscape a little bit, dig out a grand canyon for the mesa biome, add some sand dunes to the desert, before finally painting the landscape and separating them into their specific biome types. Now, as you can see, this map is enormous. I can't actually even load the whole thing in to show you guys. To give you just a tiny snippet of what to look forward to, in the Mesa biome I'm planning to build a bustling Wild West town, a railroad and some huge mines, where you may just find some secrets. I have so much story planned for this world, including an abandoned zombie-infested village in the Darkwood Forest, various ancient jungle tribes in dispute over their territories, something mysterious hidden in the snowy mountains, maybe even a Bob Ross reference in the Tiger Forest, and so much more. I'll even be including treasure hunts for you to embark on and diary entries from the villagers, so you can really immerse yourself in the story and uncover the hidden mysteries of the map. And there's going to be lots of secrets added to this map that I'm not even going to show you guys. I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys would like me to include. And I tell you what, while you're down there, hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with the project and be the first to know when it's available to download. I'm working on all of this completely alone with the help of my girlfriend in the planning process, so your support is really appreciated. So, now that we have our giant island and all of our biomes, it's time to paste in some vanilla structures, ready for their upgrades. Now, as you can see, I start by pasting in all of the villages in each biome, creating custom versions of Minecraft's vanilla villages for the biomes where they don't naturally spawn. Next, I add in all of the Pillager Outposts in most of the biomes, which will also be transformed based on the theme of the environment in which they are located. And finally, I place in all of Minecraft's larger structures, including the Desert Temple, the Ocean Monument, and a ruined portal, into their corresponding biomes. I'm going to be adding some larger custom structures to biomes that don't include naturally generating ones. Next up, it's time to add in some vanilla trees. The plains biome doesn't really spawn many trees, but I thought I'd place in some oak trees in small clusters across this section of the map. Now, for the remaining biomes, I add in the appropriate trees, creating dense forests, similar to how they would spawn in a naturally generated Minecraft world. Now that our vanilla map is ready for a big transformation, let's get started with the plains. Now, for the transformation of the plains, I wanted to keep things relatively simple and true to the original game. Keeping things a little less on the crazy side just makes sense for this biome, given that the plains is the most basic and common biome, and particularly as it's a sort of central hub to the map, and the first biome I'm transforming. Plus, these more simple upgrades will be something that you can use as a reference to build in your own survival worlds. Now, the first thing we've got to transform are the oak trees that we've just scattered across the plains. In the background you can see our vanilla oak trees, and in front of them I start building up 3 different size variants, starting with the smallest. I then create the largest one and finally one that sits somewhere between the two. Next, I go around the biome and replace the default trees with our new custom built ones. I actually took a fair amount of inspiration from Zelda Breath of the Wild for this plains biome, so to help populate and decorate the biome further, I created a few small bushes and custom boulders to help break up the dead space. I paste in clusters of bushes and boulders around our oak trees and include a few larger boulder clusters as well. In the centre of our plains, I build a raised section of land for a ruined portal. In vanilla Minecraft, these can spawn relatively frequently and pretty much anywhere. However, for this custom world, we're only going to feature one, and of course, this one was going to be a fair bit bigger than the ones we usually get. I build up 2 pillars either side of the portal and play with the design a little bit before settling on this stone archway to house our ruined portal. Now, if you compare this design to the original, it actually resembles it rather well, obviously just in a much more dramatic and upscaled way. I build the main staircase leading up to the portal and add in a few extra destroyed pillars for decoration. Obviously, there's plenty of obsidian here, which will make it much easier to build a working portal in survival, but you still need a diamond pickaxe if you plan to do that. I add debris from the pillars and finish the portal design with some of the nether leaking into the overworld. At the other end of our plains, on the edge of the biome, we place down a Pillager Outpost. Again, these structures tend to spawn in pretty much every biome. However, I always thought that there should be more to these outposts than just a single tower, which is what I plan to add in this transformation. For the tower design, I wanted to stick to something similar to the vanilla version. However, I decided to swap out the dark oak materials for their lighter oak wood variants, to match the sources of wood accessible in the biome. I top the tower off with a small flag to symbolise a pillaged faction, before relocating the tower slightly onto the cliff edge of the biome. Now, these are the small builds that can actually sometimes spawn with an outpost tower, so I start off by upgrading their tents to provide them with a little bit more shape. I only slightly upgrade the training dubbies as there's not much more that I could do with them, especially at this small scale. Next, for the cages, I change out the wood variants and make them look more cage-like. And lastly, I add in a couple of my own decorations, including a fire pit and some bundles of oak logs. I reposition our newly transformed decorations to fit around the tower, before surrounding the campsite with a spiked wood wall for a handmade look, and have this area act as a temporary fortified base for the pillagers. As an additional line of defense for the outpost, I include 2 guard towers that somewhat match the design of the main tower to sit either side of the entrance. Finally, we move on to transforming our Oak Plains village, starting with the first profession-based building, the Fisherman's House. Firstly, I branch off from the lake with a small river leading to a pond next to the village. Next to it, I take one of our village houses and repurpose the house for our fishermen to live in. I stick to primarily oak wood and cobblestone for this design, however I opt for a spruce roof, which I use for the remaining village buildings as well. I build a shallow sloping roof with a connecting balcony, before repositioning the house and connecting it up with a small jetty or pier. Branching off from this, I create a small winding pathway leading to the lakeside to provide a few different fishing spots. I build a second walkway, connect it up to the path, and build 2 small fishing boats in the shallow water. The second of our profession-themed builds in this village is a windmill for the local crop farmer. Once again, I take one of the regular village buildings and repurpose it for this specific role. Obviously, this transformation looks nothing like the original house, but farmers don't really get a nice building to live in. They tend to just work on the farms all day. So I figured a quaint windmill would fit perfectly. Using a cobblestone foundation, I built the tower of the windmill using oak wood variants, accenting it with spruce materials and a roof to match the rest of the village. I play around with the blades before settling on this design featuring some wool. Now, to the right of the windmill, I wall off a section using stone variants to create a dedicated bee farm. I decorate it with the small custom oak trees we previously made, as well as some bushes and flowers. I add in a pathway and, next to the farm, convert one of the small village houses into a house for a beekeeper. Now, this isn't actually one of the villager professions, but I thought I'd add it anyway. For the large space in front of the windmill, I of course had to add a crop farm, as the village needs another food source besides fish. Oh yeah, and these plains villagers are exclusively veggie boys and pescatarians. Pretty environmentally friendly compared to the Wild West town, but we're going to visit that another time. Anyhow, these rough stone walls fit perfectly with this simple building style, and allow you to build an easy and relatively good looking farm. I divide the farm up into 3 fields. One for wheat, one for potatoes, and another for carrots, before branching off with a stream for our water source. Now, with our farm all done, I wanted to work on the layout of the remainder of the village and create some new, more natural looking paths. I upgrade that small oak tree in the middle for one of our new custom ones and create some new village bell designs to fit beneath, and gradually repositioning the rest of the village. For our next villager profession building, we're upgrading the library. Now this upgrade stays pretty true to the original, with really minor changes being made, mostly just by adding a bit more complex detailing to the walls, an interior, and of course, adding a new spruce wood roof. Before moving on from this building, I topped it off with a small bell tower, mostly just for that extra little bit of detail. Now we're almost done with our profession themed buildings, but I decided to transform this double roofed village building for a stonemason. The materials for this building changed a fair bit, replacing most of the wood with a mixture of stone brick and cobblestone blocks to fit the theme of the building. I split the double roof in half and repurposed the second half for a small outcropping roof to shelter one of the building entrances. Out front, I built some custom boulders for our stonemason, and to add to that even further, created this miniature quarry out the back of the building, featuring this large, almost medieval looking pulverizer to break up the large boulders dug up from the ground. I thought these little stalls could do with an upgrade, so I created a nice courtyard for a proper market where villagers could trade and sell goods. The back of the market features our final profession-based building, a travelling wagon for the cleric. Now clerics are actually religious leaders and would typically spawn in a church, which we actually have in this village as well. However, I decided I wanted to create this wagon for the cleric instead because of the mysterious and magical items that they can typically sell in-game. I thought it'd be more interesting to make them into these mysterious travelling merchants that sell items across the map and fit with that style a little bit better. This also lends itself for some great backstory later on in the project. I complete the merchant's wagon with a couple of horses attached to the front of it, before adding a cart with supplies in the centre and finishing with a few benches either side of the path. Now for our final notable building of the village, it was time to transform the church. As I mentioned earlier in this video, my plan for the Plains biome was to transform the structures here to mimic the style of the vanilla default structures and theme the structures in the remaining biomes differently. So perhaps I could feature some of those places of religious worship in those biomes. I also previously stated that I'd be using Breath of the Wild as heavy inspiration for this biome, and realised that this church somewhat resembled that of the Temple of Time. Usually for my builds I tend to go much bigger, so being a little bit restricted to the size of these vanilla structures was actually quite difficult, especially for this church as the original is absolutely tiny. Obviously this upgraded church ended up being a fair bit bigger, more like a cathedral, but still felt small compared to how I usually build. I detail it with a spruce roof to match the rest of the village, and top it off with a final small tower. The remaining houses of the village weren't profession themed. The rest of the job related buildings will feature in different villages across the map. But for these last few building designs, I stuck to the same oak wood walls and spruce wood, each of them varying slightly in shape and layout. With all three designs complete, I add them around to the rest of the village. And finally, for some finishing touches, I upgrade the small fountain outside the church, place some barrels of hay, whip up a small lamppost design, transform those small flower pots, and lastly scatter around some shrubbery to decorate. But with that, we've upgraded our Plains biome. I hope you're all excited to see where this enormous project takes us, and most importantly, get the world download so you can play it for yourself. Remember to get this video to 80,000 likes, leave all of your suggestions down below in the comments, and let's make that happen. Now again, I mentioned it briefly in the last video, but considering this is technically the 1 million special video, thank you for helping me reach this massive milestone. Honestly, it still hasn't really sunk in. That is a colossal number of you that liked my content enough to stick around. I've been doing YouTube for 8 years now, and I never actually thought that I'd get to the point that I'm at now. So truly, thank you for your support. Anyway, enough soppy stuff. I'll see you in the next one.